Very pleased to be here with you. I would love to begin with prayer. Let's do it, right? Okay, God, thank you. Give you glory for the way that you work and the way that you bring your children together. I thank you for this panel of amazing women. God, that we get the opportunity to just share our hearts together today. And so I just pray that those of us that just need to hear this message from you would receive it in a way that is glorifying and would spur us forward in leadership as women. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. So what I'd like to do is let each one of these amazing ladies share just a little bit about who they are and what you do and all that. We'll start with Kim.
Hi, my name is Kim Hess, and I am the president of the Cassidy Join for Hope Foundation. This is a nonprofit with a mission to prevent teen suicide. We lost our 16-year-old daughter, Cassidy, to suicide right before Christmas in 2015, and that just changed our lives forever. So now it is our mission to do God's work and to reach other people and to offer hope and make sure no other family loses a child to suicide.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Haikimia Jackson. I am the CEO of Divinely Powered Leadership Development and Executive Coaching Practice. I started this practice about 5 years ago. Because I seen, in the workplace just a lot of the toxicity and just organizational cultural issues, and I recognized that there was a huge need specifically for minority resources and individuals that were seeking that safe space. And so that's what my coaching practice offers, a safe space for leaders and individuals such as yourself to come and feel free to amplify their voice and to empower their thoughts.
Good morning. I'm Johnnie Seago, and I am the director of the Family Education Foundation. And we are devoted to just that. We are devoted to empowering families to help their children choose their educational choices. We do tutoring and coaching. I also do personal coaching and team building and lead mastermind groups so that women specifically can be empowered in their God-given passion.
Awesome. Wow. This is incredible. Whoop, dropped my glasses. All right, so I want us to have fun today. We want this to be authentic. We want this to be real. We want to open up the door for you to be able to ask some questions. And so let's just begin. How about that? I have these on my phone. So we're going to kind of start with the question that Mark, all of the guys that answered before. In the Bible, there are so many great leaders. Which biblical leader has impacted your life? And what character qualities and principles have you learned from this leader? And I'd like to add this, and how have you applied that into whether it's the workplace or your ministries? So, Kim.
Okay, it'll start with me. And excuse me, but I did take a few notes here. One of my favorite biblical characters is Esther. She was just an ordinary girl. She grew up orphaned, lost both of her parents when she was young, and she was raised by her cousin. And she was Jewish. At that time, the king of Persia he was looking for a new wife to become his new queen. And he called out to bring all of the beautiful girls in the land out to his castle to have a beauty contest, and that's how he would decide who his new wife and queen would be. Well, Esther was called up because she was so beautiful, and lo and behold, she won the likings of the king, and she became the new queen. Well, little did he know that she was, he didn't know anything about her background. He didn't know she was Jewish, and Esther came to find that the king had been plotting to kill all the Jews in the land. And Esther had gotten enough courage to talk to the king about it and to reveal her vulnerability that she too was a Jew, and she asked him to spare all the Jews in the land. And in the end, he ended up not following through with his plan. He ended up not killing the Jews, and which is, just a reminder that to me that an ordinary person like Esther, through God, can do extraordinary things. So that's kind of what I'm reminded, that God can use just ordinary people like me and you for his good, as long as we're obedient and we allow him.
That's awesome.
Yes, so mine is Mary from Bethany, and the reason being is because she was always a student to Jesus, and she actively listened to his message, and she wanted to ensure that she absorbed all she could so that she disciple for him. And so to me, that exercised her loyalty to him, so that she could operate in his will and purpose for the disciples, and courage, because she was the only one, right, at the time. If you think about when Jesus came to Martha's house, and she sat at his feet. She was the only one. How many times have we been the only one? The only woman in the room, the only minority, the only male? And how many times have we may have felt uncomfortable, right? And she was okay with that, because if you think about the time frame and the culture during that time, they weren't acceptable of having women there, let alone having formal teaching. And she was okay with being the only one, because she knew that her reason for being there was something that was important. So regardless on how uncomfortable I was okay with sacrificing how I felt for the greater good. And I think for me and my leadership style, I'm okay with sacrificing. And sometimes that sacrifice at the time comes with a loss, but in the end is something far greater than I can even think or imagine.
So that's my leadership lesson right there. You should go first, because somebody steals your person.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. It's a good thing that the Bible is full of leaders, and so there's a lot to choose from. I want to just tag on to what Hakim has said, though, is that about Mary and being at the feet of Jesus. Our church did a 21-day fast, and we met at the church every morning at 6 to pray. And so my husband is one of the pastors there, and this morning he led the prayer service at 6 a.m., and he said, today is the 34th day of our 21-day prayer fast. And so we just didn't quit after the 21st day, because I think that's the thing. Once Mary had been with Jesus, then she was like, everything else is just a counterfeit. And I think that's the way we are, is once we have really been with Jesus, then everything else is kind of pales into comparison. So since I can't have Mary, I'll have Daniel, because I think he did the same thing.
That's awesome. Well, okay, so now, how have you taken those principles and applied them specifically to your role as a leader?
I think we shouldn't underestimate the influence that we can have on other people, and the power that we can have if we rely on our faith with God. I think, just like Esther, she was brave enough to be vulnerable, which is what we should do also, because when you're vulnerable, then it allows you to be authentic. And when you're authentic, you can break down the walls and the barriers between you and whether it's your coworkers or your spouse or your children. I think we just need to be a little more real in the world today and share our weaknesses as much as we share our strengths, and just remind each other that we are living in a broken world, and we're all a little broken, but it's through those broken pieces that our light can shine through.
Awesome, thank you.
For me, again, with Mary, it's using my courage to actually speak up. And to me, courage means it's not about just being out there and bold. It's me managing my fear in a mix of me being out there. And I recognize for sometimes, I was the token person. And so I represented everybody else. And so that impacted me a lot, right? But I recognize, like you said, being vulnerable and authentic, that's really important when it comes to leadership, because people, they know when you're an imposter, and they know when you don't have their best interests at mind. And so that's always been my thing, is being true to you. And you stands for me, is your own uniqueness, and owning that.
That's good.
So, in looking at Daniel and looking at the life of Daniel and how important prayer was to him, and I think that, how he went to his window every day and prayed 3 times, and whenever there was a decree that you could not do that anymore, and that never changed his practice. And I think in my life, I was just sharing with somebody this morning, we were talking about you don't really know you have a faith until there's nothing else. When you are down to, God, if you don't show up, I won't make it, then you have faith. And I think that was what he depended on, was God's going to show up. He's not going, I'm not going anywhere without him. And I think that I have done that in my life. And I have a little saying, like, if I miss the boat, it's not my boat. That God is not going to let me down. He's going to direct my steps. And so I have that faith.
That's awesome. And, the neat thing about Daniel is, as a young boy, God was calling him into leadership. And in that next generation today, one of my big heart cries is to affect that next generation. And we have that opportunity to do that. So I love Daniel as well as all of them. All right, so are you ready for this question? Should we do a drum roll? As a woman in leadership, okay, what significant struggles have you faced, and how did you resolve them? Do we want to start at the end down here now? Oh, yeah, okay. Kim's been on the hot seat first every time. We're going to start at the end, John.
I'll tell you that the biggest struggle that I'm going to mention is one we all have, I think, and that is that whenever you're a woman leader, people just have one of 2 emotions. They really love you and admire you and want to follow you, or they hate your guts. And that's, it's just that way. And whenever I've always been in a leadership role, I've always been a leader, and just as a very young girl, I led people. I did lead them astray, like some of my friends to have to go into the principal's office 3 times in 1 year, but I got that cleaned up. But I just think that being called a powerful woman whenever you're young is not a compliment. People don't usually mean that as a compliment. And so you have to just grow into it. And you just have to own who you really are. And I think that's the biggest struggle for women.
For me, it's what I've seen is always being discounted. So again, I started off, so the core of my expertise started off in technology as a SAP and Oracle system implementation analyst. And so oftentimes I was the only female, the only young person, and the only woman of color. So I was discounted a lot, overlooked, and received the devaluing as a definition of who I was, until I was able to identify champions to say, you need to speak up. I didn't bring you on this team for you to emulate the male counterparts. I brought you on this team for you to be unique and to add value in your own way. And so once I got that validation, I felt like that was just the message that God was sending through him to me to say, be proud and exercise the gifts that I have inherently given you. There's no need for you to look outside of yourself to be great because you're already that. Use it. That's when I became a lot more confident in who I was as a leader. And I'm so thankful for those leaders, specifically male leaders who were open enough to receive how I felt and understand my experience and say, hey, how can I help you along the way? That was very valuable for me when I was growing in my career.
That's great. I think I'm going to answer this question in kind of two parts because I feel like my life is kind of divided into two chapters, kind of like the Old Testament and the New Testament. My former career path in life, before we lost Cassidy, was I'm an architect, and I am just, by design in an industry that is really driven by mostly males, male architects, male construction and planners and whatnot. And so it took me a while to feel comfortable in my position, and I worked for a small architect firm here in the Woodlands that worked side by side with a lot of the leaders of the Woodlands Development Company, which is now Howard Hughes. So I was in meetings alongside the president and vice president and a lot of very important high-powered people, and I was asked to give my opinion and my, find my place in my role, in which the role that I was filled was a male architect had just resigned, and so he needed to find someone to replace him. And so I was the young, new female architect that they wanted to put in his shoes, which I think surprised everybody. And so it took me a while to earn my place, and it took me a while to find my voice. But kind of like what you were just saying, I finally realized that I wasn't asked to be in this position to be a follower. I was asked to be in this position because they found leadership in me and what I already had. So I had to go rely back on my roots. What are my strengths? What are my skills? And what do I know? I'm not going to let some person across the table who may be older and wiser than me intimidate me and not be able to voice my opinion and my God-given talents. So once I found my voice, then I started earning my way in respect from the other people, and I was able to be on the same level as them, and which is a really empowering thing for a woman. And then they became comfortable enough with me to begin sharing their vulnerable sides of them. I think being a woman in the workplace adds balance, and sometimes I think the males build up walls because they have to feel like they're so strong all the time. And so I just think that females can help balance that out for everybody, and not only in the workplace, but even in our homes. I know our husbands and fathers same walls, and I think sometimes just being a female, a mom and a wife, and just being real can just help that all around. So once I found my voice in the workplace, and then my life can change in an instant when we lost our daughter to suicide because there were no warning signs, and she would have been the last person that you would think would take her life. And we were just that normal family that, we were plugged into our church, and our kids were plugged into the community, we were plugged into the community, and yet it happened to our family. So we feel like if it happened to us, it could happen to anybody. Because suicide doesn't discriminate. But having found my voice in the workplace before, it allowed me to find my voice for this movement as well. I'm always been able to speak on the things I feel passionate about, but speaking on something like this that is so taboo and so hard to talk about in general, and then opening up my family for persecution and attack has not been easy. So that's when I've relied on my faith in God to help me through those parts. And I know this is like another question down the line, but I just feel like I'm in constant prayer for protection. because whenever you step out in your faith and whatever it is, you're setting yourself up for attack, and not only from people, but spiritual attack as well. And so I just think that it's so important to find your roots and to find your faith and stay strong in it.
Thank you so much, Kim. We appreciate you so more than you'll ever know. Okay, so we hear the struggle, and can I interject one little question in here? Okay, we've got this panel that's ready to go. Because what came from my thoughts as we move forward is maybe the area of weakness that you looked at yourself as. And I'll give you an example. When I was called into a position of leadership and then into founding this ministry, Reflective Life, I had a debate with God for a year. Have you ever debated with God? Who wins? He wins, right? But it was out of a fear of moving forward. And I now have a now known dyslexic situation in my life. I was the one that was always taken out of classes to try to learn to read faster, and that made it worse. So when I was called on in class or whatever to read, this fear, I would start just shaking. Even to this day, that still takes place. So God, how could you call me to come out of, with that weakness in my life, to come away from that, and now to speak on a platform where I've got to read your word? Yeah. I'm going to mess it up. And that was a year-long debate until I literally in my heart just heard the voice of God. You know what I'm saying? And Carla McDougal, I made you. I created you. I created you to be you, and you're right. In your own strength, you cannot do it. But I'm going to do in you what you can't do yourself. And so I shared it with my husband, and it was like, I thought, being submissive, he's going to tell me, honey, I know you really well. It's not going to work. So I share it with him, thinking that was going to be the answer. And nope, he was like, honey, you were made for this. Oh, no, now I've got to move forward. I got to do this thing. And, but you know what God taught me is that what I constantly, throughout my days, considered a weakness, actually he showed me it was a uniqueness. Because in that uniqueness, God is glorified. And I think as a leader, when we come, this is what God has taught me in a humble way, but as we come before those and we see that it's not about us, it's all about him and him fulfilling in us what only he can do, so that in the end, he gets the glory. So I'm going to pose this question then. The weaknesses that you may have come in with from your own human flesh, how has God helped you overcome that? And we've started with, it's kind of like, the mama bear, baby bear, papa bear thing. We're going to go in the middle right here and begin with you, sweetness.
Okay. Full transparency, okay.
I love that.
Yes.
That's what we're all about.
Being obedient to what his calling for me truly was. So, full transparency, I'm the first in my family to graduate high school, go to college, to have a corporate experience, leadership role. My mother had me at 16. She sold drugs to make sure ends met. And I told myself I never wanted to live that type of life. So I'm going to create this life. So what does that mean? I'm putting me before God. I'm not being obedient. I'm operating in my own plan and control, because this life that he gave me as a young child, I didn't want it. It was shame tied to that experience. So I wanted to escape it and create the life that I envisioned. And that life didn't align to his purpose for me. And it took, the past 5 years, that's when I actually realized that where he has me now, to be the voice for the voiceless, to advance God-given leadership and human potential, that was always the gift that he had given me years past, but I was fighting it. I was fighting his obedience. And I had to be true to myself on how I put him beneath me. And from there, it was just like a release off my shoulders. I felt like this is true freedom right here. Oftentimes, we feel like the life we create, we're defining that freedom for ourselves. I am operating in my freedom. I may not have the salary that I once had or the title, but this is freedom, and that's priceless. Yeah.
I can't go without giving you a hug because this is authentic, guys. This is what it's all about. This is what it is all about. Thank you for being real and sharing with us, and praise God for what he has done and how many people are watching where you are to give encouragement to, I think, the next generation, right? So I just clap for you. Clap. Thank you, and praise God. So, all right.
So my biggest weakness in my spiritual life, and which is my whole life, is that I don't wait. Everything is very, I like to go fast. I like to, here are your two options. Then you have a decision. Now you start moving forward. Okay, that project's done. Let's move on to the next one. There's just this constant movement and activity. And that's okay in some areas. But when you're trying to grow in your spiritual life, that doesn't happen fast. And it's just been in the last few years that I have really been able to rest in him and enjoy the work of him growing me up. Like I said, in my spiritual life, which is my whole life, and just say, I know I don't have that down yet, but you'll do it. You'll work on me. You'll fix it. You in your time, and not me striving to get those things lined up.
Awesome. Kim?
I would have to say my biggest weakness has been fear. Stepping out and sharing personal, the most difficult part of your life with so many people on a public platform is not easy. And I remember it was December when we lost Cassidy, and that year our community lost at least 6 students to suicide that one year, one even after Cassidy. Between Christmas and New Year's, there was one more. And so our community recognized this as being an epidemic, a silent epidemic. So many teenagers and adults too, were struggling in silence. And so I was asked, I worked with Howard Hughes and my husband worked with Memorial Hermann, and those two got together and wanted to do a community response to this tragedy, to address it and to find out how can we respond as a community, how can we stop it, what are we not doing, what are we missing. And I was asked to speak and share our painful story, and that was in May. We just lost Cassidy in December. And I remember my coworker from Howard Hughes, he met me and asked if I would be interested in sharing that And I just remember saying, are you kidding me? I'm still grieving. I mean, what could I possibly offer to anyone else when I'm still down here in the ditches trying to find a reason to wake up every morning? And I said, you know what, I'll get back to you. Let me pray about it. And so I met with my pastor, and we just talked about it. And I remember he just encouraged me, like I was saying earlier, to just, if you allow yourself to be vulnerable, and if you just share that part of your pain with others, God will use that, and your message will be heard from the people who need to hear it, and you'll be able to break the chains for so many other people that are struggling. And I remember having that conversation with him. I'm like, that's not what I wanted to hear. That's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted him to say, no, you're not ready. Let someone else talk about it. And so I still hadn't made my decision yet. And I remember it was Easter Sunday, and it was the first Easter without Cassidy. And I just remember thinking all day, this is the day of new beginnings, right? This is the day of redemption, and a day that we're supposed to, find new life. And I just prayed that morning. I woke up like, God, just please give me a sign that Cassidy is still here, that I know she's still here. I know she's up there with you, but I just need a personal sign from her today to just get me through it. And I remember going all throughout the day, and now that I look back, there were signs all day long, but I missed them. I mean, I was wanting, this big angel to come down from right in front of me and say, hey, Mom, I'm here, but that's not what I got. But there were little signs throughout the day that she was there. But I remember that night, I was still so heavy on my heart, and I put the family to sleep, even put my husband to sleep. And I just remember, I'd always prayed to God, but I don't feel like I've always been a great prayer warrior. I grew up Catholic, and so I knew all those memorized prayers, but I don't feel like I ever really had that two-sided conversation with God. It was more all one-sided. But that night, for the first time in my life, I just fell to my knees, and I just gave it all to him. I cried like I never cried before, and I prayed like I never prayed before. And I just told him, God, you've got to get me through this. You've got to give me strength. You've got to give me a sign that my baby girl is okay and she's watching over us and that we'll be with her again. I know we will, but you've just got to give me that sign. And if you do, here I am giving God an ultimatum. Like, if you do, I will follow you. I'll do whatever you want. If you want me to speak at that event, I'll speak. If you want me to do whatever, I'll do it. But I can't wake up in the morning without knowing. And that was the last thing I said before I went to bed that night, And that night, she came to me. And I know it sounds crazy, but God answered my prayer in a way that was so personal and so meaningful, where I knew he was taking care of my girl. So I woke up the next morning with the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders, and for once I could take a deep breath and know that it was going to be okay, that I have a new purpose in life. This is not what I had in mind for the rest of my life, certainly not, but I was going to use my pain for a purpose. And I was going to quit asking God, why did you let this happen to me? And I would start saying, how can you use me to make a difference? And so that was the switch. And so I did speak at that, we filled our church with people. And there were many people that spoke on the topic that night, and it was a very heartfelt night, and it was very hard for me to talk about it. But afterwards, so many people came up to me and just thanked me for sharing, because it allowed them to talk about what their struggles were and allowed them to address it for the first time in their lives. And slowly but surely, our community is starting to talk about such a dark topic and bringing light to it. I don't remember what the question was, but
no, that you said it. You said it right there. You just showed us exactly. To let you know how God has used this ministry in such a huge way. We have partnered together with Cassidy Join for Hope and Reflective Media Productions, and we are putting together a series of PSA's public service announcements that are teen suicide prevention. And I would like Jacob to stand up. Do you mind, Jacob? He is an example of what God is doing as we partner together and what you began. Jacob is a suicide survivor of 3 times. And he is allowed God to use his story for his glory, God's glory. And if you want to see it, you can go to reflectivemedia.org and you can watch the PSA. Already, it's been in the Conroe schools, and it only released last week. Wow. So God is doing and moving, and because you chose to say yes, he's bringing others together to help accomplish those things. I believe that's a huge part of where we need to be in ministry, workplace, is let's pull together as the body of Christ. And so anyway, I think we've got about 10 to 15 minutes. We had other questions, but I feel like we want to open this up maybe. How about that? Maybe you might have a question for one of the panel, or yes. Oh, we already have it. Come on.
You ladies are all in leadership in different ministries. I'm an elder in a church, and so I have a question for y'all. How do you, when you can lead your ministries that you're doing, but within the church, what advice would you have for church leadership, which is usually, all male, about using and developing the women leaders within the church, and how, if you feel you're able to use your leadership within your church, and how you do that, and what advice you would have for church leaders to kind of tap in, I guess, into the women leaders?
That's a great question. I see Johnny wants to answer that.
So I was going to say, I've been a pastor's wife for 42 years next month. And so in different situations, it's been easier for me to be in a leadership position in the church, and then sometimes it has not been very easy. It is very much the personality of the leadership, the pastor, the associate pastors, and that kind of thing, and their view of women. And this is a biblical leadership conference from the theology school, so I would say a lot of times people don't have their theology right about the role of the woman and the man from the Garden of Eden. Whenever God, co-appointed them before the fall as heirs and that kind of thing, and then the curse comes, and so the ground is cursed, and we're going to have pain and childbearing and that kind of thing. And you think about all the things we as humans do to overcome the curse. We fertilize the soil, we give drugs for childbirth, but that one thing about, he will lord over you, and you will desire his place. What do we do about that? Do we really seek, okay, how can I live, Genesis 1 and not Genesis 3. So how can I do that? I need an education. I need a heart change. I need to not want my husband's place, but I need to want a place. And to be that co-heir, and to see myself as that, and that also comes in the home. I think that your home has to run that way, that your husband has to, see you in your rightful place in your home, and then it can spread to the church.
That's good. Anybody else want to say anything? Did that help? Awesome. Good. What about anybody else? Yes, Terry.
Just speaking about leadership actions, something that you've observed from a leader, their actions, somebody that you admire or look to for leadership, what was that action for anyone?
Yeah.
One of the things that I admire most about the most influential leaders that I had when I was in the workplace was all the top leaders were all strong in their faith, and they weren't afraid to talk about it and show it. That's why I loved listening to the panel of the male leaders at the 9 o'clock session here, how the people that we look up to and admire the most are godly men and women. So I admire that when you're not afraid to step out and show your faith.
I think for me, it was the transparency and their inclusivity, because we are, primarily in a male-dominated space, at least for, my career path. The partner that I remember the most, he sat down next to me and he said, "I want you to teach me." So that was him saying, well, I'm gonna be vulnerable because I'm not all-knowing and I'm not all-doing. I'm gonna need you in some capacity, but I want you to teach me how you could add value, right? So then I can equip you. I'll equip you with the trainings and the opportunity to present or to put your name on a deliverable, but teach me about you. I'm not gonna automatically assume. And that was, he was amazing. And he always just had that open door policy. He made himself available. And that's what made him, I think, valuable to the team.
So my leadership role model was my dad, and so from just a little bitty girl, he was always teaching me, about leadership and integrity. And once you know what's right, that's what you do. It's not up for debate. And he was always learning himself. He went to lots of seminars and leadership conferences and things like that, and then he would come home and just pour that into me. And like I said, even when I was just a little bitty kid, and I guess that's the leadership trait that I really do desire, is to be teachable, like you said, to always be learning, to never be the knower, but to be learning all the time.
I might add to that. For me, I had a example of a leader that was so encouraging, and those words of affirmation spurred me forward to even want to be better. And I keep that in the back of my mind constantly as I'm leading a team. I've found the more that I encourage and share what they have accomplished, what they have brought to the table, I find that they can't wait to do the next thing, And so encouragement's such a huge part, I believe, of what I've learned as a leader. So, yes.
I'm going to punt. No, I'm not. I'm going to answer, but then I'm going to punt. I will say, you can't avoid those women. And I think that that's what we want to do. One of the guys on the panel earlier said, you find the dog, you hunt it down and kill it. I don't want you to kill her. It's not advisable at all. But I do think those women in my life that have been that way, that the longer I avoided speaking to them about it, the worse it got, because that, through my avoiding, I was telling them it's okay. That it's okay that you gossip. It's okay that you talk behind my back. It's okay that you're not inclusive, that you're not transparent. And so by doing that, I was fueling their sin. And it is sin. I mean, we're called to love one another. We're called to be in a body. And if my left hand hated my right hand, we would have to do something about that. So I think, so the women that I have known about that did that, and I have gone to them, so my little speech sounds something like this. I know that we're different, and I know that you have your strengths, and I admire that, and I know that that's the way that God made you, and I know you want to feel that way about me. I think you should let yourself. So, is it fun? No. Do I have to curl my toes under in my shoes when I'm saying it? Yes. Yeah, but the pain doesn't last for very long. But if you keep avoiding it, you're exacerbating the problem.
That's really good. That help? Awesome. Great answer. Guess what? Okay, one more, and then we're out of here.
What do y'all do to keep growing as a leader? What does it look like for your personal learning plan? What book?
Anybody want to answer that one? Oh, me! What do I keep doing to grow as a leader? You know what? I find that when I connect with other leaders, for me, books are great and all that, but for me, when I connect with other leaders and pray together with them, and I think that for me is what really encourages me to move forward and grow and learn from one another. So I have a number of different leadership groups that I'm part of that has helped me in that. But I believe prayer is the significant, that connection to God. So, all right, well, I've gotten this a couple of times. So I just want to thank you for being here with us. Thank you for this panel, amazing women. And you know what? The fact that you were so willing to just unzip your heart and be real allows us to take it with us, right? So, God, we thank you. We glorify you. We just give you the praise for what you have done in this last hour. I pray for the rest of our time together, God, that you would allow our networking and our connections and even prayer pockets today to rise up, and may we grow together because of you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Thank you. Bye.